Alright guys, welcome back to Only Divergences. Today is Sunday, November 7th, and we are getting ready for a new trading week. In this video, I will be initiating coverage on Boeing, ticker symbol BA. The stock had a nice week, bouncing right off of support, and now we have to talk about the longer term implications of this move because there are some big ones. For that, I've been in love with the stock because it's basically been a university course on technical analysis, and at times it's even been a bit of an ATM. So I want to show you what I see right now. I think we can see a bigger move higher over the next few weeks and months, and I want to outline that with you here and outline why, so that you aren't just believing what I say blindly, but you have the confidence to understand the picture that I'm trying to paint here. And if you don't believe me, then that's fine. I'm always open to criticism. Downvote the video and tell me why I'm wrong in my analysis. Just be honest with me. If you're new to this channel, hit that subscribe button if you want regular, objective technical analysis of highly traded liquid stocks with no hype. I aim to be as objective as possible with my analysis. Okay, so on to Boeing. Let's go to the daily here just for a second. We can see two big moves this week, one on Monday and one on Friday. We have to talk about this because I think that this is different than what we've been experiencing. Now we have to provide some broad context for Boeing because this is an old company and the stock has been through a lot recently. So let's make sure we cover all of our bases. So on the weekly, we have to outline the context. The stock has basically been rising since the 2009 low. And I mean, just look at this. Its low was 6.5 cents. That's just absurd. But we can recognize that off of the lows, it moved higher in waves, right? I just want you to pay attention to this. Just keep it in the back of your mind. Okay, we rose higher over the course of a few months, and then we consolidated for 3 years, basically. Then we had another year where we just exploded higher and more than doubled. And then we, again, consolidated for 3 years. And then we more than doubled. In fact, here we more than tripled, or just about tripled. No, more than tripled, excuse me. And then we consolidated for 2 years before falling down and dropping. So one thing to point out is that right now, any move higher is not pushing against a new all-time high. So that means that we want to manage our expectations longer term, but at the same time, we have to acknowledge just what is going on here and why the bullish case is actually quite strong. So right now, let's just describe objectively the behavior of Boeing post-COVID crash. Okay, so what can we say? Is there an objective pattern here that we can outline? Well, I would say yes. We can do this on the weekly, but I think it would probably be better on the daily. And what do we notice here? What do we notice about the stock? The stock moves basically in a typical pattern of a move higher, followed by a consolidation, followed by a move higher, followed by a consolidation, followed by a move higher, consolidation, move higher, consolidation, move higher. You see, this is a very typical pattern. I want to go back to the weekly because you can actually see it better on the weekly, excuse me. So you can see it here, right? Move higher, pull back, higher, pull back. These are waves, okay? And now we've been in a very long pullback, okay? This consolidation has been almost a year, probably more than that, depending on how you measure it. And so this consolidation is longer than any consolidation that we've had post-COVID. Now, if you recall from my Lucid videos where we called the breakout before it happens, we said the longer the base, the higher the space, meaning the longer that a stock consolidates, the bigger of a move higher you can expect. And I think that that applies here as well. So if these types of consolidation moves produce moves higher like this produces this produces this, then this type of a consolidation move should produce a move that is much higher overall if we are using this as a fractal analog, right? That's the assumption that we're working under. It's happened before several times, and we are currently in the process of it happening again. How that will happen, I can't say just yet, but we're going to take a closer look. I think the easiest way to understand this is that we can just say that Boeing has been consolidating for some time. And the question we want to ask ourselves is whether Boeing is going to move lower from here or whether it's going to move higher. That's really the only question you really need to ask yourself. Now recall, every bounce higher since the lows, we peaked higher than the previous peak. So you can see this was a high here off this bounce, then this was another high here, then this was a higher high here, then this was a higher high here. So technically we remain in an uptrend. Also with the lows, I can draw a line like this. It's not a perfect line, but it's pretty good. It's close enough. You can have this here. If we just pull it up here and give some benefit of doubt to this, remember that this is, there was a lot of momentum here, right? This was a collapse. And so you don't have to be perfect when it comes to this line. And as long as we have 3 of them, which we do, actually we have 4 or 5, depending on how you count it, but basically 3 periods, that's good enough. But right now, we really just want to focus on this wedge right here. Let me see if I can draw a rectangle around what I'm focused on. This right here. You can see this area here we've been in, and the question is, are we going to pop out of it higher here? And I think that the answer is yes. We've done that here, we've done that here, we've done that here. A lot of prediction, just looking at the past and asking if the future will repeat. Now I know that when we take a look at the MACD here, the positioning is a little different. It's not the same here. You can see all these times we were down here, very oversold, relatively oversold, but now we've started to turn under, and we don't have any material, bullish divergence here on the weekly. So yes, you can add that as a factor to your analysis, but I don't think that that's fatal, especially in this instance. Personally, I think that the current pattern is such that we would want to start preparing to enter long on pullbacks like this, right? We saw the big move here, and we consolidated for 3-4 days, and then you want to move higher. And that's really what I'm going to be looking for moving forward, using previous moves higher as analog examples. Now, you can see the moves that I'm comparing it to here on the daily chart. Let me just push this over a little bit so we can see it a bit clearer. Yeah. So, generally we are looking at this move. These are similar moves. Comes down, moves higher, consolidates higher, consolidates higher, consolidates higher. Now we've got a long consolidation, and so I actually am very much of the opinion that we are going to move up higher like this, similar to what happened last November. Remember when we had the vaccine news and we exploded? We're in a similar sort of situation. We had a double bottom here. We have more than, well, you can say this is a double bottom, but it almost looks like a quadruple bottom here. And so we have the right setup for a move higher. The one thing I do want to point out is that if you look closely at all of these moves higher, you will notice that they were all very volatile. There were big thrust periods, as you can see. This was big thrust. Right here was a huge thrust, 4-day thrust. Here we had gaps, thrusts, thrusts, thrusts. But in between them, before them, and after them, there were periods of high volatility. This is immediately significant because I think we just had, or maybe we are still in the middle of a high thrust period. Obviously we had a 5% day, just about 5% day here on Monday, and then a 5% day on Friday. This has been a pretty big positive week on a relative basis. We could still be moving higher. And because I don't like chasing moves like this, it's one of the reasons why I am waiting for an objective pullback before entering. If we go down on the hourly here, just very quickly, I want to point this out. You'll notice that we have green down here, which, when was the last time we had a green reading down here this far? I think we have to go pretty far back. Just give me 1 second here. So just in what we can fit on our screen here, if we take a look at this green reading here, this is the lowest it's been. The last move higher was not as high before it started pulling back. This move higher, this green level, we are below where we were at the peak here. We're even below where we were at this peak here. And take a look at the elevated red. It is very high, elevated black, very high, similar to the peaks that we had here. So I would assume that in the immediate term, like Monday or Tuesday, the immediate upside potential may be limited. Now, we can have a pop. In fact, I don't think that it's crazy to assume that we would have a pop, but that's not a pop that I want to participate in just because of how extended we are here on these relative momentum positions. But overall, this pattern, let's go back on the daily because I just want to emphasize this. I find that this pattern here is very similar to this pattern here. Okay, we had a big move higher and then a long period of consolidation. We had a nice little divergence, and then we continue to move higher. And I think that that's what we're doing here. Have a nice little divergence, and we're going to continue to move higher. Now, just looking at the momentum indicators, I'll just stick to this area here just to make it easier. You'll notice that during these moves higher, even though they were volatile, what happened is we had a low red and then we flipped over to a green. This positive green histogram down here. And we stayed there for a while before we peaked, right? Same thing here. We were red, flipped over, stayed there for a while before we peaked. Red, flipped over, stayed there for a while. I mean, it wasn't that long, but it was still, quite a few candles, right? And quite a few days. Look at those. Those are a number of bars. Same thing here. And even same thing here. Now, take a look at where we are right now. We just started. We only have one bar. Maybe you can count this one as another bar here. And so, while I'm not going to predict precisely how it's going to move, it's not unreasonable to make an assumption that we should expect more green bars here before this move higher is over. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not going to consolidate here and we could pop higher. Who knows what can happen, right? But remember, even back here when we popped higher after the vaccine news, what happened? We had some volatility. We had a couple days of coming down. Same thing here. We had volatility, right? So know that if you are going to go long and you do believe this bullish movement, then sure, you can do that. But understand volatility is on the way. We can also take a look at the DMI, which similarly we saw, what happens when the move starts to happen is red starts to point higher and flip higher after green is elevated. See, green is elevated, red starts to flip higher, green is elevated, red starts to flip higher, and we recently had green elevated and now red has started to flip higher. But what we want to point out here is that before all of these moves higher were over, one, the red reading was much higher. See, it's right at 29.95 right now. It was much higher in the previous peaks. So here, it was up here at 40 level. Same here, above 40. And here it was touching 50 before it did it. So not only was it higher, but also notice that it stayed high for extended periods of time, weeks, before we got to the peak. So that's what I'm expecting right now. While I think that we could get some consolidation, I think that we are at the beginning of this move, and that's probably how I'm going to be treating Boeing moving forward from here. So we will see how things go. I'm looking for dips, but I don't want to go into that too much here, and I think for now, all I'll say is that generally I would expect higher prices given what we've seen in the past week within the context that we have. Could I be wrong? Sure, but that's what the pattern is telling me right now. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. I'll be putting out a couple more videos today updating some stocks, so make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you later. Take care, guys.